And here we are for an episode of Dualistic Unity Raw, Monday edition, but not Monday morning edition, because again, our schedule has changed. If you're wondering how our schedule has changed, go to dualisticunity.com, click on the community button in the navigation bar, and you will see a group schedule. That is where we not only show where we record episodes, but also where we do group Zooms on our Patreon channel and for free. So you can find all of that there. You can even download it as a calendar onto your calendar app, make it nice and convenient. Aside from that, the only other announcement is that we have all fucking 4 hosts of the podcast here for today's episode. So I'm very excited about that because we don't always get a chance to do this. But I think now with our new schedule, this might be a little bit more possible.
Perhaps, maybe a little bit. Yeah, stoked to be here, guys. Yeah, honestly loving the new schedule because I would always be like waking up like right before the Patreon call at 10 a.m. And I'd be like, oh, what's up, guys? And maybe that's late and maybe I do sleep in, but I love that. And I don't think that's something I would change in an ideal world. So I'm loving the new schedule.
I'm so glad because, we're trying to make this more accessible to everybody, especially now that we're moving forward in a number of ways with our company and all of that. And I want to talk about this today because, we haven't really had a chance. And I figured what better way, because we here at Dualistic Unity, it's all about transparency, right? And within reason, of course, we're not spilling company secrets. I mean, nobody's going to get the secret to enlightenment from any of us, but we can talk a little bit about what it is that we're doing. And what I wanted to talk about especially is Jackie, actually, and how excited we are that you joined us throughout this process, because see, to me, this is a different journey than it is for everybody else. And what I mean is that for me, it was a journey of what? I was on my own. There was nobody to talk to. There was no community. There was no podcast, nothing like that. There was just me ranting at anybody who was close to me for years, and then finally figuring out to tone it down and take it in myself. And then all of a sudden, I found somebody else who wanted to have the conversation with me. And so for a little while, the conversation was a different thing for Andrew than it was for me, right? For me, it's an expression of half of my life intentionally. And for Andrew, it was kind of like, it's fun. Like I'm enjoying this. It's kind of going through. So it makes me uncomfortable from time to time. Like he was still sussing out a lot of what the hell the podcast was for him. And so early on, the retreats, the website, stuff like that, leaned a lot on me, right? And then Andrew went, fuck, I'm enjoying this, actually. I'm not just enjoying this, but I'm getting something out of it. It's getting fulfilling for me. And then there was a whole other discomfort that came with that. But slowly, what he's done is prioritize things towards the podcast over time. And so I did the same. Like I was working a full-time job for the first year and a bit of this, right? And then I started taking some more time off, or rather things worked out where I had more time. So I was able to put more into the podcast. But every step of the way, I've reminded myself, I can only do as much as I can. I can only do as much as I can. And then all of a sudden he came in and he's like, I can only do as much as I can. But slowly that's become more and more and more. And then all of a sudden Amanda came on and she's still working 2 jobs, right? But slowly that's going to work its way out. And you're here with us. And I'm looking forward to watching the transition as this becomes more of a reflection of the changes in your life rather than something else to do in your life. Because this is going to grow on its own. You have experiences that you're going to go through. You have things that are going to fill in the time that we need, right? As we all transition in that way. So that way you can come back and share even more information and more insight with us and help this grow in its own time. And so I just wanted to say that I'm excited for not just the growth of Dualistic Unity, but the insight in my life that it has its own time. There is its own timing to this. It's not about how hard we push. It really is just about us embodying what it is we're talking about. Authenticity, being yourself, and then watching your life change accordingly. And this just happens to be a part of it, which is kind of fucking cool. Like when it's not something you're pushing for or chasing or trying to build, and it just ends up being more and more an expression of the changes you're making in yourself. It's very fulfilling. And so I just wanted to talk about that very quickly, because I don't know about all of you, but very often I've judged myself for not doing more. I've judged myself for not, having a better plan or making better decisions or knowing what the right move is or any of those things, right? Or maybe not connecting with everybody as much as I'd like to, so on and so forth. There's always something to judge myself with about is what I'm saying. But despite all that, this is all working out incredibly, right? And so I want to say this not just to Jackie and to Amanda and Andrew, who have all fucking joined this in their own time or created it for themselves in their own time, let's just say, but to our listeners. Because some of you may end up joining Dualistic Unity down the road. You may end up fulfilling a spot in this organization yourself, and you may come in going, I got to force this, I got to do my best, and it's just, no, because if you run into us and you find yourself a part of whatever this is, it's an expression of how much you've changed. And so we're excited to see you when you get here, and when you do get here and you're like, I don't know if I should be here, we're excited to talk to you about that as well.
Oh yeah, that has been definitely weighing on me a little bit recently, of just like getting to this point where I see all you guys together, and then I'm like, okay, well, I'm contributing in my own way what I can, and like I'm doing yoga and everything, and so I know on one level that what I'm contributing is valuable, and that if you guys expected more out of me, or if I was doing something wrong, we would just have a conversation about it. But I think I can get in my own head, and like I have this really high bar for myself with everything in my life, and I feel like that's something I'm working through. And I always feel like I need to be doing more in every area of my life, and being more connected with people, and maximizing my potential, I guess, in a way. And so I can just project that on you guys, honestly. And I'm like, dang, like I feel like there's this divide when there's not, besides the physical space, but I like how you mentioned just how things change as you change, and it's been really cool to see how that's happened for me since just last year, just being on the Patreon calls on around this time, just barely bucking up the courage to raise my hand. And so I think me opening up and being more vulnerable and more authentic has contributed to me, becoming part of, the podcast and co-hosting, and that's been a whole journey in and of itself. And I've realized a lot of things preconceived notions that I've had about the podcast, and maybe how I've looked up to Andrew and Ray a little bit. And that came crashing down, not that you guys are like not awesome. You're cool people, but it's like you're no one to like follow. You don't have the answer, and so now I've kind of come to this spot with doing the podcast that I'm like, what am I really trying to share? Like, it just feels like I just don't really understand what the point is, but at the same time, that's the point, it's not trying to impart some wisdom. It's not trying to like give people any sort of answer or silver bullet or way of being that is going to make things better. It's just to like talk about the fact that we're all dealing with this big question mark of like, how the fuck do we navigate this experience of existence? And there's no right way. And that I've that's frustrating to me, I guess, right now. But yeah, and the insecurities with me not contributing enough, or being as connected or as big of a part of the community maybe as other people is, not helping that that feeling of like, oh, I don't really have anything to say. So I guess that's just real honest what I've been going through.
But I do want to say something in response, because this is something that every single person here has communicated in some way at some point. I don't feel like I'm doing enough. And I want you to understand that for me, especially, I didn't ever expect anybody to do anything at all, Jackie. So, I mean, everything that you've added in the conversations on Discord, in the Patreon groups, just in our conversations with each other, coming to the retreats, all of that, doing what, you're over 20 episodes of Dualistic Unity Real. You've been in every alternate episode throughout season 6. You've been with us for quite some time. And all of that came about through a chance conversation that you and I had, where I was looking for somebody to partner up with Amanda to do the podcast. And you at the same time, without knowing that, went, yeah, I've been thinking about podcasting. And so it just lined up. And I just want you to know, like, everything you've added to me is huge. Like, it's just huge. I cannot tell you how massive it is, just in contrast to how little I've seen everywhere else. Like, you do this because it's an extension of what you're doing with your life. So again, I look forward to watching that grow, because that's exactly what it is. You know, what you put attention into grows. And I like to think that Dualistic Unity is a reflection of just being yourself. That's what we talk about. We don't talk about anything. We just talk as ourselves. And then we go, why is that so hard to just do that shit from time to time? And that's the conversation. And as such, because we're growing that in our own awareness, we see DU growing around us. You know, and so I'm very excited. I just want you to know, like, everything you've put in has not just been enough. It's been more than I could ever expect. And I look forward to watching that grow. Trust me, there's nothing on this side except a huge, overwhelming feeling of gratitude and excitement.
I feel very, very similarly to that. Like, the thought of, like, oh, is Jackie doing enough has literally never crossed my mind. Like, every thought I have when it comes to Jackie is like, looking forward to yoga. Wow, she's really putting in a lot of things here. Like, it's really cool to see how willing she is to just show up to things and be herself and, like, have a great time on the episodes. Like, I've never had the thought, like, oh, Jackie showing up to it, like, not even close, like, even in the realm of that. So it's and I resonate a ton with that feeling of, like, getting to the point where it's like, what am I really sharing if it's not this sort of, you know, conversation, like this deeper sort of existential, like, interconnected sort of thing. It's not to say that isn't the case, but it's not the point to be focused on, I guess. And for a while, you know, you can hear it in first couple seasons, like, it was very much, I was super curious about things, didn't really understand much about, oh, maybe if I'm not this story, like, what am I? And I was very curious about that. It became very specific for me, to the point that I was confident in showing up, that we'd be able to steer every conversation in that direction, take every conversation in that direction. And now, similar maybe to you, and just like the last couple months, realizing, like, oh no, it has nothing to do with, like, a specific thing. It's me and my experience and what I have to share and what I have to add, from a spot of just, like, nothing being there. Being like, well, I'm going to choose to share something. I'm going to choose to add something, because why not? And so it's an interesting crossover with the podcast, like the quote unquote work-life balance, because everything you just shared here with what you've been going through, like, that's what this podcast is. It's like living our lives, being willing to change. Like, we're all going through all sorts of shifts and changes right now. We can show up and talk about how we're doing things. We're living our lives, like, very fully. Like, we do a lot of shit throughout the day. And so we can hop on here and be like, oh yeah, you know, when you talked earlier today about being a karaoke and something spilling on your pant and all these things came up, and then you decided not to do it, you got on karaoke anyway. Like, that's, if anything, what this podcast is. It's experiencing reality and then being willing to jump into things and talk about the experience of that. Like, oh, I judge myself for a bit and then I stop. And sometimes that's going to have to do with what we're doing with Dualistic Unity. Like, even sometimes showing up for a podcast feeling uncertain, or like work specific things, like me shifting more into, you know, doing more business stuff. Admittedly, when all this started, it was one day a week conversation, and that was it. I didn't have any thoughts of like a lot of where things have gone, but each and every step of the way, like things started to make more and more sense to me. Like I've gotten to many points where I've gone like, hesitated, gone back and forth. There's been a few that immediately come to mind, like 2, 3, ones where it's like, I don't was feeling so unsure about everything. And we chatted through it and worked through it. And I've gotten to a point now where it's like focusing on it. I've realized that, it's my life that I'm expressing, that I'm sharing, that I'm showing. So like nothing else does make as much sense to me as to be involved in this, but there's no weight or pressure because it's not like something outside of you. It's your experience, and just having the gall to talk about it and like be honest and open about it, which, you fucking crush all the time.
Oh my goodness. Jackie, we were just chatting earlier today, and I'm so glad that we were just chatting. I at first was like, do you want to record an episode? Because we haven't been recording as much. And I know that I have been feeling that space, that extra space, because I miss you, Jackie. I love chatting with you. I'm so grateful that we get to go on this journey together, and that we get to be co-hosts, and we get to do our own thing, and then tell each other about those adventures. And I appreciate how open you are and how effortless it feels to talk to you and to be myself. And it is an absolute pleasure to watch you being yourself. And I absolutely love it. I'm so excited I get to see you. I am very much looking forward to, getting back to our schedule now that, things are settling again after moving and the retreat and then camping. And I feel like, things are I'm finding a new pace. It feels like there's a new pace being set. And I very much look forward to seeing how that all unfolds. And so I just wanted to say, I appreciate you being here, you choosing to be here and to share your time. And I look forward to just being able to hang out and just be friends, as well as do something totally different and to try to find a way to build something differently without getting lost in a new identity, and just kind of building without expectation. And I'm so glad that you're willing to do that. So thank you so much for showing up and sharing the experience of Jackie. I have signed up and I'd like my season pass already.
And I have one more thing to add, just to keep things in context, because I like to keep things in context. It took these 2 to 3 years to move over here after getting involved with this. I already lived here. This was easy for me. Right. But you've been involved with us for over a year now, like 2 years of just chatting with us, but a year being on the podcast almost. It's coming up in like 5 months or something like that. Point is that it takes us a little time to get everybody out here. But as soon as we can, we're looking forward to you coming out here and working on some of the shit with us, because it's going to be fun, because everything's moving to Canada. Like Dualistic Unity, our company in the US, is moving to Canada. Things are happening. We've got a huge advertising campaign coming up, which you're going to be a part of. Right. This is going to be great. We got a lot of shit to do. And then aside from that, if anybody's wondering, because I know that this has come up, the investor round is now closed. We are no longer looking for investors in this round. We actually have enough investors to do what we need to do over the next year. We will be looking at a second round of investment after the November retreat. If you would like to look at what Dualistic Unity is doing, its revenue over the last 3 years that it's been around, how it is that we intend on making more money as we move forward, specifically advertising, because we do have a large amount of advertising space, and we do cater to a large growing industry in terms of health products, mindfulness, cannabis, psychedelics, and more. So there's a great deal of advertising space that's available here, and as soon as we continue to get more exposure to other companies, we're going to fill that space. So that's where a lot of our revenue is going to be coming from in the future, which is why all of our investors are very excited to move forward with us, because we have a lot of potential to grow. But the most important part about all of this is that no one person is ever going to take the lion's share of the pie. It's always going to be capped for everybody, meaning that the majority of what we make goes back in to what we're doing, the impact, the growth of it, which is very exciting. It's very different than other models that we've seen, just because everybody wants to get more for them. You know, like it wouldn't be uncommon for Andrew, say, to go, I'm like one of the founders, I should get more than that. And that's exactly what would normally happen. Right? Normally that's what would happen. It's like, no, I should get more per month than anybody else because I've been here the longest. It's like, but you're doing as much as everybody else though.
Yeah.
Right? Like that doesn't change. And so that's basically what the point of this is. You know, it's just that. So admittedly, we're all just shoestringing it at the moment, but once we can all be paid, I mean, the rest of it just continues to go into DU. Right? So who knows where the fuck we're going to be even in 2 years. You know, and that's going to be exciting. I can't wait until you're up here doing yoga classes in person.
Yes.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's simultaneously so exciting and like terrifying at the same time because it's so much change. It's so much change, and like we're doing something completely new. And it's like, of course I would feel some sort of hesitation or like questioning it from time to time. And you know, it's reassuring to hear that you guys have had multiple conversations of just being like, what the fuck are we doing? Like what? Like like
Mhm.
like I do not want people putting me on a pedestal. Like what is the point of the podcast? Like what are we trying to do with this? And you know, it's nice to be able to just be real about that and
Yeah.
like not have it be met with any sort of resistance and just like, yeah, like of course those questions would pop up here and there. But it feeds into like what this all is. And I think that's, you know, becoming more clear. Yeah, it's like not about anything. It's about us embracing uncertainty, open, like, you know, with open arms and all of the ups and downs that come with that. Like we shouldn't expect it to feel like enlightenment or feel like, you know, we're doing anything right per se, because we know that there is no right and wrong. There's just, you know, different variations of experience, and there's times where we can hold ourselves back out of fear to no real benefit to us. And then this is an exercise in throwing ourselves into uncertainty and reaping the benefits of it. Because I don't even know how, it's crazy to me how much I've changed since just having this space to have a conversation and be whoever the fuck I want to be and share whatever I want to share. And I've seen how it's changed my life, you know, so I shouldn't question so much why other people would listen or participate. Like it's meaningful, and it's hard to conceptualize that, but that doesn't make it any less impactful. You know, it's hard to say exactly what it is we're doing here. But
life.
yeah.
It's hard to define.
Mhm.
Very meaningful.
Yeah. Well, and this is why I like what it is, because this keeps getting clearer in terms of what the fuck are we doing here? And it's not a podcast. It's really not. It's an expression in uncertainty for each and every one of us. And you, this is an act of faith. We have no idea what the fuck we're going to talk about. We just keep talking about existence and just that insecurity of not knowing what to say necessarily. And that is leading to other things that we might have some insecurity about. You know, it led to doing retreats, for example. I had never hosted a retreat, right? I had never planned retreats in other countries. Like that was terrifying for me. That entire process of trying to do all that and all the mechanics that went into that was a lot. And it was an act of faith, and they turned out great. Right now, we've got other things that we're doing, more acts of uncertainty. Now he's planning the retreats for the most part, you know. But eventually, you two might plan the retreats, or you're going to come up with a different idea entirely, which is an expression of something that you want to face in yourself, and that becomes part of DU as well. Because that's what we're really all looking for, isn't it? Just an example of being willing to try, to not be afraid of the result, regardless, but to be willing to try and to actually watch something flourish in real time from those attempts. This is why the podcast, the conversation, whatever this is going to become over time, whether it delves into real estate, whether it delves into retreats, whether it delves into all kinds of other shit, whatever it is, it will always be an example of just believing in your own potential. You know, and to me, that's cool because I think that's what everybody wants to know. It's like there was no specific skill or talent or you know, there was no guarantee of success. We just kept fucking doing it.
Yeah, so of course it's like hard to define, hard to know what we're doing, hard to figure out, hard to put our finger on like what's going on, and experiencing it in real time too now, like throughout the days that we have. It's like it's so interesting how much, because I'll gravitate towards trying to define it, trying to figure it out. I'll go through a period now that our calls are in the afternoon, like in the morning, where it's like there's a bunch of things. And just the practice of knowing there's a lot of options, like a lot of things I could do that are work specific, but not having someone telling me, well, do this and do this and do that. And just me choosing, I'm going to do this and I'm going to feel okay about doing this. I'm not going to judge myself or assume that I should be doing something else as I'm doing this. And like that whole process in, you know, a company like this, like even just going through that, like I'm learning so much about myself in this shift and change. But this conversation, I mean, this has opened up my own perspectives too, in kind of like taking a new or like refreshed point of view of what this is. Cause it's like, I go through the same exact sort of back and forths all the time, like even within a day, but like in trying to define what this is, trying to make sense of it, trying to, you know, explain what we're doing to someone. Even like every time someone asks, I'm like, blah, 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 and like we'll say something and it doesn't, I'm like, I don't know if that even made any sense, but like I can't even know how to define what we're doing because it hasn't happened yet. Like we're not trying to stick to a specific track. And so there's a fuckload of freedom in that, but there is a side where it's not going to be something that you can pinpoint or like cohesively, coherently, like specifically explain or have some like a little bit of that hit of knowing what's going on, like the good feeling that goes with knowing what's going on or how you're doing. That's just very fleeting because, you know, it isn't necessarily about feeling good. Like there isn't this line to getting towards feeling good. It's just like kind of being cool with yourself and like not having to feel good, more or less. But looking at that and being like, yeah, that's what we're doing. And we're facing uncertainty. And then we're talking about it and just like living our lives fully is really what any of this is. So it's like on each of us. So anyone who's willing to do that, like, fuck yeah.
Welcome to the party.
I know. And I think about like, if somebody were to ask me to define it, what came to mind was like, you know, awareness is being experienced in unpredictable ways, and it sounds so vague, and it reminds me of the saying with that in nature nothing is rushed yet everything is accomplished, and in a forest there is no plan, there is no agenda, there are no bullet points, and yet, you know, things are just experience and things are just sensitive to each other, and in that sensitivity there is growth, there is expansion, there is creation. You know, things are just going and growing and things are just moving, and there doesn't seem to be a plan, and yet somehow it all seems very appropriate, right? I feel like that's like the best word to describe it, because not that it's right, but it just feels like appropriate to what's happening. And that's what this kind of feels like. It's a very vague thing to describe, but there's a lot happening, and there's a lot of attention, a lot of awareness that's being experienced without necessarily a specific destination or a specific expectation that's trying to be maintained.
Oh my God. And so it's funny. This is one of the things that really drew me to being an entrepreneur. It's one of the reasons I created my own business like 16 years ago. And the reason I stopped working with other people was I got kind of tired of dealing with everybody else's shit and their insecurities just for the sake of the secure job. And so I'm like, no, I'm going to go out on my own. I'm going to do this. But there was always a set product. There was always a set demographic. There was always some degree of certainty in terms of what I was doing and who I was looking for. Whereas with this, there's none of that. There's none of that because we're not looking for anyone at all, right? We're just here being. And the people who stumble across it are going to stay or they're going to go. And so we don't even understand necessarily what this is about. We're just here watching it happen. And that's life in a nutshell. It really is. And what I like is that we get to have that conversation honestly. You know, that's all this is. It's not something that says this is going to solve your problems. It says, look at them. You know, like we're just having a conversation about the process of existence, not even the process, the simple fucking experience of existing. That's it. That's what all of this is about. That's why people can relate to it if they want to have that conversation, right? But I've looked, no one's having this conversation, right? And the way that they're having it is still in a way that is self-soothing. It's still in a way that's trying to feel better. It's still in a way that's trying to become something rather than to just experience existence itself. And so I'm very excited because how are we doing this other than just by going through existence and watching it grow? All we've done is just continue to put attention into this conversation. Because I think we would all have this conversation with one another, even without the podcast. If we knew each other, we'd be meeting for coffee, we'd be shooting the shit, you know, we'd be going out. And this is what I mean. Like, the more we do this, all of a sudden these two fuckers are here. Like, that's weird for me. You have to understand, because I live the hermit life by default, right? And most people run from me, but we're all having a blast. I have no doubt you're going to end up coming up here more often. Fuck, we're going to see you next month. And then we're going to see you in November. And this is exactly what happened with Amanda. All of a sudden, we kept seeing her at every retreat. And then all of a sudden, we were seeing her in between retreats. And then suddenly, we're all just hanging out, right? So it's just a frequency thing. It's kind of like the ups and downs we go through, right? The more you're willing to go through them, it's like they get a little quicker, but they also like lower a bit. Like they're not quite as big, you know, and it's just boom, and it slows down. This is just a matter of change happening over time. I'm very excited. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, it's almost crazy that it's possible that this is a business. It's like, it's kind of insane the way everything has worked out. And yeah, I just am so in awe almost of the way that it's unfolded. And, but yeah, I think that really is the point. It's just airing out this feeling that I think everybody has when they realize like, oh, you know, I have this vivid experience of being alive and aware of myself and all this shit going on in my head. But everybody else fucking experiences that. But nobody just talks about just that. Like it's they talk about it from the perspective of, oh, I have a solution to your anxiety, your insecurity. You just have to say affirmations. You just have to, you know, do these specific things. And that's just so hollow. And I that's what attracted me to this conversation in the first place, is just, we're just talking about like the baseline experience of existing. That is really it. And what that is like. And just for me as a listener, it made me feel so much less alone. And so, yeah, it's funny though, like me sharing my own experiences, I assume that they don't have the same impact. But that's also shit that I'm working through, that I'm sharing and other people can relate to at the same time. So it is cool how like, no matter what it is, no matter what insecurity I'm going through, and I feel like I feel almost a pressure to like feel like I have it together or speak with any sort of authority. But that's so against the point, like reflecting back on that, because who really wants to listen to somebody who has it figured out and it's just at peace all the time. It just feels like a lie. And that lie, and that lie's coming from insecurity, but they're not going to talk about that insecurity, right? But we will.
Damn right we will.
Yeah, 'cause there's stuff under the surface there all the time, but the thought of like right answer or right way, like it also creates a lot of pressure and like the assumption that you're helping someone, the assumption that you're giving an answer. It's like, oh, I got to show up and make sure that I do something outside of myself instead of just sharing my experience. And I can't tell you how much of an aversion, both an aversion, but like a realization how I felt like I have been so selfish throughout my life that the thought of talking about my experiences, I started to like have an aversion to that, to the point that it was almost like all I could think about, but then I wouldn't want to talk about it. And I didn't even realize how that's kind of what everyone's doing in some way, shape, or form, like a story from something they've experienced or something that's going on, or connecting and relating to people. And if you do take out like a potential way to respond, like I realized trying to focus on that and not talk about myself or not share my own experience was making it harder to like come up with any response to anything. And then it was like, oh, there was nothing there. It's like, oh, well, maybe there was something that you were resonating with, but you didn't want to share your own experience. And like, and even just the experience of not looking to so many other people. Like, again, not to say that's a silver bullet where it's like, just stop looking to anyone else and trust yourself, have faith in yourself. But there's, tendencies, like the more selfish you act, the more self-involved, more focused on trying to make yourself more better. Like there's, not repercussions, but there's a response, consequences, ripple to that. Exactly. So it's certainly not about showing up and expressing anything. It's more just like showing up and like showing up to new things, showing up to this and just like seeing where it goes. Like we don't have fucking agendas showing up to these, but it's like things are still talked about, things are still said, and people listen and sometimes resonate. And it's like, that's it.
I really like that. Just show up.
Yeah. Show up and do.
That's right. Right. That's enough. That's enough. And, when we're thinking about like, being the listener and not have anything to say because we're no longer viewing ourselves as the listener, it's like, yeah, but you are always talking to the listener inside yourself. That listener never goes away. You never. So you want to say, not that you want to, but the thing that I try to make a consideration of is, am I saying what I would like to hear, where I'm resonating, or am I saying what I think you want to hear, where I think you're resonating? Am I saying things for hypothetical reasons, or am I saying it because I actually resonate with where it's coming from? And just speaking for myself, because what if no one resonates on a particular call? What if no one resonates with me? And that's a scenario that's just as likely to happen as the whole room or some of the room or a part of the room resonating, is that no one would. And then what am I going to say? Am I just going to be like, well, that's it. No one's listening to me. I'm checking out. I'll talk to you guys later when you actually want to hear me. No, I would still want to be able to show up for myself. And if you resonate, it's because it feels like it's talking to, it's talking from a place where I actually feel what I'm saying and not just that I want to hear what I'm saying.
Yeah, like we're not talking to be listened to necessarily. Yeah. Like we're just sharing and even if they don't resonate with a specific thing that you're sharing, or they don't have that same experience, people can still see you bravely showing up and sharing your whatever it is you're going to share. And this isn't an easy thing to do, like having these words that I'm saying recorded and able for anybody to listen and form whatever opinion they want about me. And that's something that we all are dealing with constantly as we build whatever this is and we keep showing up. So like even if we don't agree or we can't relate to everything that somebody says. Like even just the act of showing up in and of itself is something that people can resonate with, because we all know that it's difficult, because we all have this internal experience of doubt and insecurity and, you know, wanting to cling on to certainty. And so all this is just an exercise of, you don't need that. You don't need the false certainty. And there's a lot of beautiful things that come out and are able to be expressed when you just allow yourself to be comfortable with not knowing what you're going to say. And that's been a really cool process for me too, of like working through things by just showing up and opening my mouth and witnessing almost what is said, even though it's something that I hadn't like written down and be like, oh, I'm going to share this. Like it may have never even occurred to me before the moment that I said it. And so it is just a fun exercise of just building faith in yourself.
Through self-dialogue, because that's all it is. And it's funny, I don't know if I ever mentioned this, that one of the reasons I stopped being a life coach, not that I don't offer one-on-ones now, I just try not to. Like I don't really talk about them much because frankly, I don't like to do it. But one of the reasons is because I started realizing that people would come in to be comforted by going through the process of what they were going through with me, right? But then when they'd leave, they'd want to write back or call me and go, you know, can you walk me through that one more time? And so what dawned on me is that what people are really looking for is this conversation in their day-to-day life with themselves, not with other people. But when you're going through something and you're insecure, to actually talk to yourself like we talk to ourselves here on the podcast and go, okay, I'm insecure, so that's okay. You know, there's nothing wrong with being insecure. I know where it's coming from though, because this is what I talk to myself about. Like all I'm ever sharing is the process I'm going through for me, with me, right? And so when people say like, oh, I wish I could hang out with you, it's only because, well, not only because, but often it's because of the comfort of the words I'm saying that they need to learn how to say themselves. Not the words, but the process of working it out themselves, to take that stance of responsibility of like, just calm down, let's just work through it. Just work through it. And that's where a lot of people like chatting with me, because I'm working through it. I make it very light, right? But they can do that themselves. They don't need me, right? Nobody needs this podcast. Nobody needs this conversation. Everybody can have this conversation with themselves all the time. And that's really what most of us who are listening to this or participating in this, that's what we're practicing. We're practicing walking ourselves through existence, having that dialogue with ourselves. It's just we're doing it out loud, and a podcast is being recorded.
Yeah, it really is that, like those words and bringing the weight yourself, and realizing that if I'm the one that's bringing the weight myself, then of course I can't look to anyone else. Of course I can't have someone tell me how to live, or of course there's not a right way to live or to act or to show up, or anyone period to lean on or look to. But you know, if there's people who are doing similar things, like you can have a lot of cool conversations with them about that, and like interact and communicate. And like, again, it's oh man, the amount, just like I think growing up throughout life, like you assume that there's someone else who can do something, you know, for you, as opposed, and like that's never going to take away from your ability to bring the weight yourself, from your ability to respond to a situation and make assumptions and jump to conclusions.
Right.
And like, if that's always on the table, then it's like you don't have to worry about doing it from time to time, but just be aware that like you can perpetuate it or not. And the only time you can stop is now. The only time you can not bring or not make something heavy, or even how heavy you've made something, it's like, oh, I don't have to bring that weight along anymore. It's like you can stop that. But yeah, so it's just harping again on it's never someone else. It's never someone else. But that's also not It doesn't mean like, oh, you got to do everything completely alone, or like never ask someone their thoughts on something if you are working together, because you can gravitate very far to that. Like, oh, I shouldn't even ask because then I'm allowing someone else's
You're
perspective
alone anyway.
to dictate something.
Ask away. Have as
Yeah.
many conversations as you like.
Right.
It does not change the alone thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Oh my God, I love it when you first started talking about like the weight that we bring, Andrew. My mind immediately was like, oh yeah, we're like doing like we're lifting, like we're doing mental exercises, and the first what ended up coming mind was like, it's not cool to think that by doing reps with more weight, I'm somehow being responsible. Like with the most weight, I'm being responsible. And then I was like, that doesn't really apply right now. And I'm just going to get back to listening. And I'm listening to you. And then you're like, you got to ask for help. And I was like, God damn it. That's exactly it. That's doing the reps with more weight and thinking that the more weight means I'm being more responsible.
Sounds reckless.
It's reckless.
Mhm.
And that's the not asking for help, is doing the most weight without any help and trying to do the rep by myself anyways with no spotter. And it's like, it's not cool to lift more weight by yourself. It's cool to pay attention to the amount of weight that you're lifting every time you do a rep, and being sensitive to the times where you're taking on more weight without realizing it, or you're not asking for a spotter when you can, and that's perfectly okay to do, right? Because being responsible doesn't mean not asking for help, and asking for a spotter is just as responsible as taking some of the weight off the bar.
Kind of like when I asked you to join the podcast.
Thank you so much. I was just like, bringing to the analogy. I was just like, that's just nonsense
beautiful.
in my head. And then I was like, wait a second. Thank you, Andrew. Put that together. Bing, bang, boom.
Mhm.
Fresh off the presses.
There it is.
No, but I love that. And I think there is such a pressure because we live in such a like individualist society of like everything you have to, live for yourself. You don't need anybody, which in one sense is empowering, but it can also be extremely isolating. And then we can kind of get into this habit of constantly performing like we have everything together when like we all just so desperately crave like somebody being like, I'm really just being honest enough to be like, hey, I'm struggling with this. Even somebody that you think has it all together, like that, those are some of the most beautiful moments in life, is where you can connect with somebody just on the basis of your shared humanity. And yeah, it is a process of learning not to judge myself if I struggle with things, and practicing opening up. And there have been these feelings that have been brewing in the background for maybe a couple weeks now that I haven't brought up to any of you until today, right? So like, and I had such a fear of doing that, which was completely unwarranted, and just talking about it makes things everything so much better. And yeah. And Jay put in the comments here, he said, I feel like what I've been healing from the most is the belief that there was someone else with the answers. And I very much relate to that too, is just looking outward, whether it's a person, a teaching, a spiritual guru, a fucking religion, even the concept of God, of just like clinging desperately to the hope that, there's somebody else who can save you from your experience. And Andrew, to your point, like it's never going to happen. But, you can sit next to somebody else has that same feeling. And like when you are able to talk about it, it becomes less of a burden to bear, I would say. And that's
again,
what this is,
something that every single person in this group has went through. The process of letting something kind of grow in the background, not communicating it, not sure how to bring it up. Then all of a sudden it comes up and the other person's like, yeah, that's totally normal. And that's exactly what we've all gone through. Because again, this is what change is. It's recognizing that we're going to go through some shit. We're going to internalize it. We're going to personalize it. We're going to feel like we're on our own. even when it's not the case. And so it's important that we have these moments where we recognize we all really don't know each other that well. And this is the process of that changing, right? Is to face those little insecurities, to go, I don't know if I can talk to these people. I'm going to try and find out. And then it's like, oh, fuck, I can, which changes the relationship as we move forward. But this is not just true for the four of us. This is true for everybody who's listening to this, right? Like if you want to get to know people in your life, allow time to pass. Allow yourself to go through the process of not knowing where you fit in with them. And remind yourself, you don't need to fit in with them. Have the courage to express yourself, regardless of what they fucking think about you. You know, because that's the only way you're going to find out. So I love the fact that this is exactly the point of all of this. It's just to face life. Just to face life and not to be so fucking hard on yourself. You know, just to stop judging your progress and to actually just have a conversation about whatever the fuck it is you're going through with the lens of awareness and responsibility. Right? And I think that that's the only thing that's really changed over the last half of my life, and especially since joining the podcast, is the recognition that it really is just an exercise in being responsible for my life, and then sitting in front of this fucking microphone and just chatting with myself and thus everybody who's listening. Because Andrew and I had this conversation the other day, because we'll be talking and all of a sudden he'll pull out his phone and suddenly it's like there's a fourth person, right? And they're looking at it, but there's nobody there. It's just a camera looking at us. And so I always envision just a shadow with a question mark. It's some version of me that is listening to this. I can't tell which one. There's a huge spectrum of versions of me, from selfish to selfless. Right? And so I just talk to all of them in the most general, authentic way that I can as myself, knowing that the whole spectrum of them exists within me.
Yeah, like that conversation we're having with the question mark, and just wondering and almost like being in, we kind of talked a little bit about it earlier today, but being in new environments and seeing where those underlying things are, and like being willing to go through shifts and changes with eyes open, and also talk about it as you go, like not even necessarily refer to things that you've been through previously, but actually talk about your active current experience as you're living it, as you're sharing it, as you're showing it, as you're documenting it. Like it can feel intense, you know, but it's still like every single time it's opportunity to remember, like, you know, that whatever you're expressing is going into this question mark, like how close, and again, a part of me wants to be like, how close to authenticity can you get? And it's not even that. That's still another thing that you're doing, as if there's some version of you that's the authentic version of you specifically, as opposed to completely undefined and no way of knowing, even like with any semblance of certainty, how you're doing or how things are going. And being able to continue on without having so many of that, or feeling so much of that need to know how things are going. So it's super exciting, you know, from that perspective, from every perspective. It's like, oh, it's a lot of things, but it's certainly, cool.
It's very full.
Yeah,
that's really it, because excitement implies some degree of like, whoopee, and it's not necessarily that, but it is a full fucking experience, which is, I think, what life is.
Absolutely. I mean, it's everything that's available right now, which is all of potential. You're like, that's incredibly full, and it only feels like it's something that's lacking once all that potential is filtered through the perception of lack. Something is not right. Something should be different. I'm doing something wrong, or someone's doing something wrong to me. And it's like, as soon as I make any of those perceptions, it's like all that potential has now gone through this extremely tight funnel of what's not here, which is just an opinion. My opinion is saying that there's something that's not here, but there's nothing but potential here, and I can go in any direction. But you know what takes the steam out of need? Responsibility. It's like, oh fuck, I made those needs. No one told me I had to have a specific need. I'm the source of it, and I'm responsible for those needs. And so being responsible for those needs, I want to make less of them, because I'm like, fuck, man, that's a lot of work. That's some bullshit. I don't want to. And I'd want to pass the buck, but I still have to experience that need, whether it's met or not, in my opinion. And that's what kind of like almost makes it undeniable that I'm the source of that need, is the fact that whether it's met or it's not met, I experience both. So how can I say that it came from someone else?
Yeah. I love that image of like everything being funneled into this tight, narrow perspective, and it just loses so much of its vibrancy, so much of its potential. And yeah, I think that's, a little bit of just how our brain kind of works, and it tries to just understand. And so part of understanding is conceptualizing, judging something as good or bad, safe or unsafe, like however we want to, whatever adjective we want to stick onto it. But it really just is what it is. And like Ray, you were saying about the feeling of excitement, it is this full feeling, and you can look at it from two different perspectives. You could see excitement or anxiety. They feel very fucking similar, and it only like collapses into that one potential as soon as you decide that that's what you're experiencing. Otherwise, it is this just open-ended thing that could kind of go anywhere. And so, like, bringing it back to the conversation about DU, like the issue only arises when, and the anxiety only comes up when we try to figure it out, and we try to like pinpoint it into this something that has this specific purpose. And I understand why there is a pull to do that, because that's how everything in our culture works. Like, it just, you want to be a brand, you want to like you want to be easily digestible, and experience is not easily digestible. And actually trying to digest it easily gets you into a whole lot of shit, because you settle on all these certainties that then become the walls of your mental prison. Whereas the more that you're able to let them go, there's just more space. And that doesn't mean, like Amanda, you were saying, like, you're not going to go through the ups and downs of like all of the false certainties that you were hanging on to before, and like what letting that go feels like. It's almost like the floor falling out from underneath you in a way, and it's exhilarating, but it's terrifying at the same time, because all the things that have made you feel better are no longer there. And but it's simultaneously a beautiful process of just being like, yeah, well, you're okay anyway. And there's now so much more on the table, and like you see yourself grow and change so much as a result of just not trying to settle on a certainty about who you are, what you're capable of, what your future is going to look like. And I think for me, with everything getting real with DU, and like the possibility of this being like a full-time job for me sometime in the near future, with everything picking up with advertising, it's like that potential future of me, having a safe, stable job that like I guess I was still hanging on to, that fell out, and I'm reckoning with that at this current moment. And even though it's anxiety inducing, it's like I am able to still kind of appreciate it even as I'm going through it. So yeah, just life is so full, and it's so exhilarating and meaningful in and of itself. And I love having a space where we can just talk about it. Everyone else thinks I'm crazy when I talk about this shit, you know what I mean? So it's like it's just nice having people that are open-minded enough to hear me out.
Yeah, because we don't need anything from you. That's one of the reasons we appreciate you. So you don't need anything from us, which is why you'll hear us go through shit round and round and round, and you don't judge us for it. You're just like, oh wow, look at them going through shit. round and round and round, right? And trying to take it lightly, learning from it as best they can, and aside from that, just authentically showing up. There's a lot of power in just that. But I love the fact that you just basically described both our I guess what makes us very different from everything else, but what is also the biggest challenge when it comes to our business, which is that we can't just have a singular brand. We don't have a singular message. We aren't offering any, silver bullet products. In fact, there's nothing to base what we're doing on. There's no certainty whatsoever. And that is the fucking product. It is just the fact that this is a conversation you don't find in other places. We're not out to get the most listeners because most of those listeners don't want to have this conversation. Right. And that's what you're really trying to do when you have a brand, a message, a particular strategy. You're trying to get the most listeners that you can. Right. But then you start selling out your integrity. Then all of a sudden you're changing your messaging over time to get new demographics. Right. Whereas we don't want to do that. We want this to be a fucking gauntlet. That's why season 1, I brought up as much weird fucking shit as I could. For sure. Because anybody who's going to go through season 1 has got to be willing to question some shit, right? And that's the difference here is we're not catering for the point of being more popular, having more control, or making more money. We're having faith in what happens when we don't do that.
So much of what you're left with is just opportunity. Like that's the beauty. As much as this isn't stable, structure, rigid, in the sense of like a typical 9 to 5, like under the surface of all those is just as much uncertainty. We're just like looking at the under the surface because like a 9 to 5, there isn't stability. It just feels like there is more so because it's more common of a thing
Until they go bankrupt.
Exactly. And or anything happens, shit goes down, shit is like any sort of shit hits the fan. Like there's always an underlying uncertainty to every business, to every project, every day everyone lives, to everything that we do. And I think if anything, we're just looking at there's like everyone's not assuming that they're sitting on uncertainty. Like they built a structure big enough that they feel like they're far enough from it, but it's still moving. It just feels less shaky because it's further from the ground maybe. And we're just there, on the ground, recognizing like, no, this is entirely uncertain, but can we build a business around that? And in that is so much opportunity when it's like, no, things are uncertain and you can be honest about that. Because most people are just like, no, they're not. They're not for this reason and this reason and this reason and this reason. I have all these assumptions and I assume that everyone else sees me in this way and life is this way and reality is this way. And as long as I am a good boy and do all the right things, I'll go to heaven when I die. But we're just looking at that because from the business side, it's like there's nothing but opportunity. Like you want to be more business focused or start a business or be like, there's very much a business side. And that's a side that, as you said, over time, I have, gravitated more and more towards. And that's the thing in my own life, like having a better understanding of just like the business world in general is something that I'm very interested in. It's like, oh shit, we're doing all this stuff that is exactly appropriate to where I'm at. And did I have to work through some shit over a couple of years to even realize what the fuck's going on here, which isn't what I was thinking it was, but making assumptions about before? Maybe.
But with perfect timing.
For everything.
Because you literally just cleared a bunch of shit in time for all the business stuff that you had an interest in.
Right.
Which you could not have done while you were going through your shit. You would have had no interest in doing so. The timing, I'm telling you, works itself out. I think that's all we're doing is really just getting past this idea that each of us individually is in control of whatever the fuck this is part of. That's really it. Like this is just something that exists through attention, like anything else in our reality. Democracy, countries, religion, currency, they all exist through our attention and agreement. They've all grown through our attention and agreement. That's all we're doing here is putting attention into this because we see the value in doing so. Right? I don't know where that goes. You guys don't know where that goes. But fuck, is that exciting? Because that's that's exactly the final frontier for humanity. Uncertainty. To actually have faith in ourselves and others and see where it goes. Because up until now, it's been all control and all the consequence of control.
I love it because we were talking about like what's our product. It's like our product is uncertainty. So many businesses.
I don't know if I want it.
I'm feeling uncertain about this uncertainty. I'm not really too, but that feels very on brand. So I like it. So
Talk about that.
No, but a lot of other businesses are selling you a product or a service that will control uncertainty. And that's the difference with us, is that we're just admitting that the product is uncertainty, that you can't control it, that there is no legitimate reason to pretend that you can, because you never have. And instead of us trying to build our business and our lives and to base the foundation of a lot of, if not all of our experiences on trying to control certainty, it's just not worth it. And we've lived it. We've worked for those companies. We still sometimes work for those companies. And that mentality it's almost an immediate ripple where you feel that sense of lack almost with everything that you're doing, because you know that it's hollow. You know that this control is an illusion. And no matter how hard you pretend, you just can't shake that feeling that what you're doing isn't actually providing you the guarantee that you want. And so I prefer that our product or our services are just uncertainty. Almost like the product and services acknowledging uncertainty is there, and that there's enough space for it to just remain as is without needing to do anything with it other than being that space for it.
Yeah. And that really hits too. Just there is no actual certainty. So it's like the difference between the metaphor of like being afraid and hiding under the covers, in something that feels secure and safe, when whatever is out there, like you're putting yourself actually in a more vulnerable position by not seeing the uncertainty or not, paying attention, not continuing to pay attention out of just fear of the discomfort that uncertainty will invariably bring you. So yeah, it's like, and still that discomfort isn't gone, even if you're hiding under the covers or in that safe job, or, following the path that has been laid out for you by society or whoever the fuck you're listening to. There's still that doubt in the back of your mind, like you were touching on, Amanda, of like, what am I doing this for? Like, is this actually giving me the benefit that, was promised? And most of the time it's not. And we're just trying to convince ourselves it is. And so like just living in the reality of uncertainty and taking on that responsibility that's what I feel like growing up and maturity truly is. And I think that so much of our society is so like just living in this state of like childlike fear almost, and coping with that by trying to act like they're all adults and like they have it all figured out. And we're all just secretly suffering in these like masks that we wear, of just like, oh yeah, like I have this stable job, I'm doing the right things, like I'm gonna go to heaven. But at the root of all of that is the uncertainty of like, but do I actually know that? Am I actually getting the most out of this life? Like that's always going to be a question, no matter how much you think you're in a state of security. So it's almost more smart and better for us in the long term to just embrace that uncertainty head on. And we grow so much in terms of our strength by just facing that and not shying away. Well, sometimes we shy away, but then we look again because we know it's worth it.
The pendulum swings.
Right.
Yeah, because often we're like, this uncertainty thing it's good for me. Where does it go? And that's the problem, right? It's like it's appropriate that if you're going to embrace uncertainty, you let go of where it's going. And that is often the challenge, is that we've done so many things in our life with the impression of false certainty, that we had the impression of control, that to willingly just embrace that that was never the case and to allow life to do what it does, it seems revolutionary. And yet we got it without thinking when we were children.
Yeah, and ever since, it's like there's been side effects one way or the other to that sense of, control or that sense of certainty, like not looking at uncertainty and being like, no, I'm sure of this. I can guarantee this. And like, I don't know, at least in my experience, like the side effects that I felt from the path or things I focused on, you just kind of like deal with those side effects and get good at dealing with those side effects, and then can assume that they're not side effects, to assuming that you know what's going on or happening, but it's still there. Like it's still there under the surface. And so not assuming that what's going on, and then surrounding yourself with a bunch of people who also just believe the same thing, because that can feel comfortable. It can really feel like what's going on, but it's like no one can escape the side effects to everything. Like every choice we make, it's not to say that there's one that's like got no side effects, no consequences, no repercussions, ripple to everything. Everything's unsure, but just a willingness to be like, yeah, I don't know this. Yeah, I'm not sure where this is going. Yeah, I don't know how I'm doing. And like, I can be okay with that, like come to terms with that. I don't have a direction necessarily. I don't have set ways that I think that I'm even improving myself right now. Like I don't feel great about how things are going in my life if I think about it. But like, why would I? And I'm not saying that specifically. It's like, oh, well, it's personal, just seeing sides of myself and whatnot. Anyway, it's like, why do you need that? Why do you need to think about your life? Why do you need to think about how you're doing? Why do you need that hit? It's like, that's always just going to be a distraction of what's going on right now. And usually that's when we run, when it is, a new situation, a thing like, someone who is convinced they've overcome all their fears just probably hasn't tried a new thing in a little while. But like that practice of like trying things you're afraid of, doing things that scare you, like there is a practice there, and not a place to get to, or like a destination, but it's like, it's there, an opportunity. And it's like, yeah, I got a lot of shit that's there. And it's like, why not get through it and see what's on the other side of all of those things? And this is just space to do that and talk about it. And a lot of it just have to do with what we're building here. So that's cool.
This has been a dope episode. I'm going to pass it over to Amanda. We got about 90 seconds left. I want to remind everybody, join us on Patreon after this. It's a tier 1 call, which means all tiers can join. $5 a month. You can chat with us on Zoom like 5 days a week. Amanda.
Oh, I love what Andrew was saying. And I just wanted to say that, like, when we're thinking about things to try that scare us, just consider the fact that you could make yourself scared of anything. Opening the door, going to check your mail, going out to the grocery store, picking up a phone call, sending a text message, taking a shower. Like, you can make yourself scared about anything and everything. So don't think that you have to come up with this list of like daredevil things to do to challenge yourself. Just know that you could convince yourself that anything is scary. So just consider that the next time something feels scary. Consider whether or not it actually is, or whether you just convince yourself that it is. And on that note, I look forward to chatting with you guys soon. And thank you for joining us.
Stoked that you could be here, Jackie. Thank you.
Thank you, Jackie.
Of course.
Love you.
Yeah. Yeah, we'll have to do another 4 co-host episode soon. But yeah, this has been great, and just airing out all this shit that I've been stewing on has been awesome. And just knowing I'm not alone ever, and simultaneously I am, because shit's paradoxical like that. But
Is why you're a fucking co-host. Hell yeah. All right, everyone. We'll see you very shortly. Talk to you very soon, and look forward to a 4 co-host in-person episode from the November retreat.